identified always as a Christian, I think, but I didn't really know what that was. And I, finally to the point where after everything was going great for me in the world, you still have that same hole to fill. And I went back and I read the Bible again. Remember what this country could be.
Wow.
When we're all together, when we're united. There was a part of Reagan that was very, very private, almost impenetrable. Really, I wanted to get down to what that was. And I think that was his relationship with God. Along with Franklin Roosevelt, Reagan had more effect on human history, I think, than anyone else in the 20th century, for sure. Ended the Cold War.
He was a father figure to a nation. And it felt like, we were talking earlier, it almost feels like Ronald Reagan embodied this kind of, almost, let's just say it the way we did, father figure. And the nation needed a father
He was
figure.
Everybody's dad, in a sense. That was for better or worse, because you have problem children and you have those that, go along with the dad, or there's that struggle or that close relationship there. And I think that, that is carried on. I mean, in his legacy, I think people still feel that.
Yeah.
Going way back.
In that fatherhood, there's that leadership.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That I think we all so admired. We're all about the same age, and I remember turning 18 and being able to vote for President Reagan.
Right. Well, the thing about Reagan, he governed by principles.
Yeah.
And, that didn't have to do with like the issue of the day or whatever whichever way the popular wind was blowing.
Right.
And he made a lot of decisions that had people scratching their heads sometimes, or that they would be against, but they were based on principles. And in the long run, it's principles that endure.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes to be a leader, is to sometimes make very tough decisions.
There needed to be a little bit more of a father figure to really represent the bigger picture of what America is and what America wanted to do. And there's a lot of connection points for me. My dad, was in radio back in the day when Governor Reagan was here in California. And there's a lot to it. 1983, the year of the Bible, my dad was so excited to be back in Washington, D.C. when that declaration kind of got put out there and everyone was so celebrating all that. So there's a lot of really great stuff. But why don't we start by, first of all, saying, Dennis Quaid, thank you for taking on this role.
You did an amazing job.
Laurie and I have seen the movie.
I really appreciate it. It was it's my favorite movie I've ever done.
Aw.
And which used to be The Right Stuff, but just I judge my films by the experience I had while I was making them, and this was just one of the greatest pleasures and challenges of my life.
So we were just talking about how it felt like being out at the ranch, at his and Nancy's ranch, and you doing some of those scenes that had just to be...
I had to pinch myself because we're doing the scenes that happened at the Reagan Ranch, and this is like 40 years later in that very same place, and it's kind of have chills go up your spine about it. And the ranch is not open to the public, like the library. And, a group of his friends got together and to preserve it. And they left their clothes in the closet. When you go there, you feel like Ron and Nancy are going to come back in a half hour or something. Wow. It's exactly like it was. I didn't say yes right away to playing Reagan because one thing, he was my favorite president. Everybody knows what he looks like. I didn't feel like worthy in a way of it, but I didn't want to do a love letter about him. I wanted to really get to where he was as a human being, and it took me a long time to say yes. And I went to the ranch, and you go up 5 miles of the worst road in California to get there to the top of the hill, and you come out through the front gate, and I realized that Reagan was a humble man.
Wow.
I could feel him there, and the house is this Western White House that they had. It was 1,100 square feet, maybe. They had a king size bed, but it was 2 single beds that were zip tied together.
I love it.
You know, there's little things like, you know, the basket in front of the television with the 3 different
Remotes.
controllers and a note from Nancy on how to, you know, do all this stuff. He had GE appliances,
Yeah.
you know, so I'm sure he got a good deal on that.
Yeah.
But could really feel him as a human being.
Wow.
And it, you know, he's in that place, and that's when I said yes.
We want to know a lot about your experience with this, but our audience, you know, you're on Trinity Broadcasting, you're on TBN, and our audience cares about you. They care about wanting to know about what this really meant to you, and you know, a lot of times I have to remind guests sometimes that to say, this is the friendliest audience you're ever going to speak to right now in regard to this. And they want to know about you, your faith, how that played
Basically,
into
this
it.
is fellowship on television, isn't it?
Come on now.
That's right.
Here we go.
That's really that's what it is. You know, 2 or more are gathered,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think you got a little bit more than 2 or more.
Yeah.
I hope so.
How did your faith play into this? And what is your, you know, how's it?
Do you see
How
any
does
parallels
that-
between yours and Reagan's faith?
Well, yeah, you know, in a way, you know, I like my story and my story of me as a Christian. You know, I brought that into the role of Reagan, and you know, I was born in Houston. I was Southern Baptist. You know, growing up, you know, we went to the First Baptist Church downtown Houston, and then switched over to Bel Air, Texas. But you know, it's that in the 50s and 60s, it was such a great time to be a kid in this country. And I was baptized when I was 9. And in my teen years, I became disillusioned with what I call churchianity, I guess. You know, and it was also late 60s, early 70s. There was a lot of other things that were, you know, pulling at this country. And I got into, I read a book called Siddhartha. I got into reading about other religions, Hinduism. I went around the world. I read the Bhagavad Gita, the Dhammapada. I'd read the Bible, you know, cover to cover, and read the Quran. And you know, there was a drug culture at the time, you know, back in the 60s and 70s, it was the drug culture that was going on there. It was about to expand your mind, you know.
Did
You put
you
all that
inhale?
together.
It was
You're
like a
mess.
spiritual experience.
Did you inhale?
Did I hit it? Yes, I did inhale.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. I'll say it right now. But, you know, I wound up, you know, things are, you know, it's all about really filling that hole, that empty hole inside you. And I identified always as a Christian, I think, but I didn't really know what that was. And I, you know, finally to the point where after everything was going great for me in the world, but finally getting to that point, after I did Great Balls of Fire, where I played Jerry Lee Lewis. Yeah. God bless his soul, rest his soul. Yeah, I was in rehab about
I think he
6
was
months
too, yeah.
after. Well, I'd been his 5th go around, but I wound up in rehab about 6 months after I finished the movie. And when you got out, you still have that same hole. You know, you might get sober, but you still have that same hole to fill. And I went back and I read the Bible again.
My goodness.
And
What year
this time
would
around,
this have been?
that would have
roughly?
been 1990, 1992, right around there. And it this time it was the red words of Jesus in the New Testament that really hit me, and that was the beginning of my personal relationship with
great?
Jesus Christ.
Wow.
You know, I'd never really gotten that before, and that continues to grow. But that is really what everybody's looking for, whether they know it or not.
What age would this kind of maybe first time realization of what a personal relationship with Jesus is? What age were you?
I was in my 40s.
Yeah, in your 40s.
Yeah.
So you kind of did a full circle thing. Started in church, went around the world looking, searching, and came back to that truth in the 90s.
Yeah. And, that had a personal relationship. But that's not the end of the story. I'm a human being, and I go through cycles and, of ups and downs, peaks and valleys in my spiritual life, that sometimes, that God is silent, and then I wonder, but I've always, I talk to God,
It's called prayer.
Yeah, and a lot of it's called listening.
There you go.
So, through that, my relationship with him deepens, and it's, I am where I am today.
We do these kind of conversations a lot, Dennis. There's this interesting kind of thought that you can apply to some of these, seasons in your life, as it were, is how do you even know you have faith unless it's called upon? If you never go through a desert season or this kind of midbar, a silent season, and what's really interesting about these kind of silent or what we would call a desert experience or something like that, is the Hebrew word for desert is midbar. And if you would ask somebody that understands the Hebrew language, they would say midbar is actually a positive thing. We think of silent seasons in our life as these kind of God's distance from us and he's left us alone and all that. And the Jewish connotation of midbar is very good because the desert, the wilderness is where you experience God. And it's a positive thing in the Jewish kind of language. And we sometimes get that all wrong, that if it's quiet or it's a lonely season, or if it's kind of a desert season, we're distant, we're further from God. And maybe it's the opposite of that. Maybe that's when we're actually closer to God, that he's nearer to us.
Faith and trust is strong.
Even at our lowest point, you're saying.
Yeah.
Jesus on the cross that's crying out to God because God was silent even then. And it's a stress test, I guess, in a way too, isn't it? When you were talking about faith, you don't know. How do you know you have faith until it's
called upon?
That stress point. And, we have our knee-jerk reactions, and then that gets back to the principles that we were talking about too, with Ronald Reagan as well. About you have something solid there that you can go to in those times of trouble. I wrote a song about those seasons in life.
Really?
That it's called God Gets Lonely Too.
My goodness.
That how he wants to have a relationship with us as much
as we need a relationship.
As we need a relationship with him.
Yeah. Right.
You're very familiar to our viewing audience. You're very familiar to Laurie and myself because we've seen you on the big screen, the small screen. Behind you, there's a poster of you that I actually thought for a moment that was actually Ronald Reagan and that you were turning into Ronald Reagan. I realized, no, okay, that's actually you back there. But how did this experience of playing him come about? You're taking one of these people out of history that you realize the largest news event in our lifetime was basically the end of the Cold War. I mean, that's literally one of the biggest events in our lifetime. And this guy was, as it were, hell-bent on getting that done.
He, the Pope, and Lech Walesa basically accomplished that.
Maggie Thatcher was kind of thrown.
Yeah, she was in there too. Yeah. And Reagan had been fighting communism all his life, really, from the time that he was president of the Screen Actors Guild, by the way, and he was fighting communists there.
Yeah.
because they were trying to take over the unions. People thought it was an old wives' tale that, but then when the Soviet Union fell, they found the files, and, they were trying to take over the unions. And, boy, did we need him. It took a cold warrior like him to really know what the real world was like and lead us there. And it would be a much different world if it weren't for Ronald Reagan.
I'm interested in knowing how you approach this craft that you're doing, and taking on Ronald Reagan is a pretty tall order.
Yeah.
I understand your mama kind of had some effect on you.
A little bit, yeah. She got to do this because I didn't think I looked like him, or I definitely didn't sound like him. And he's one of the most recognizable, like Muhammad Ali, recognizable in the world. And so, that really a fear went up my spine about it. And that's usually a sign that I should say yes, because it gets me out of my comfort zone about it. It's but it's about the way I work is it's about from the outside in a little bit, but also finding out the humanity, getting down to what makes somebody tick, and something that I can relate to a person with. We both have sunny dispositions. I know that we're both actors, and it's about. There was a part of Reagan that was very, very private, almost impenetrable. That I found everyone who had known him had said, and really, I wanted to get down to what that was, and I think that was his relationship with God, actually.
Wow.
I really do. There was a very private place in there that was hard for anybody else to enter.
Yeah.
A very private man.
Feels like whenever...
And this is the great communicator.
Yeah, it feels like whenever he would speak and embrace faith and faith issues. Again, this 1983 was, quote, the year of the Bible, and so many of the Christian leaders, my dad and others, and Bill Bright and all the ones that were kind of there at that time, were so, they were literally enamored by the way that he could command the attention of the world. And figuring out how to do that on screen had to be the fear moment coming up your back to walk in and actually portray that.
I mean, he had to get there himself. One of the things I kind of felt when I play a real person, I feel like I have an obligation to play them from their point of view. And that means finding out, about their strengths, or, that can be obvious to all of us that we admire and stuff. And sometimes to find out, get to maybe some of those insecurities that we all feel too, because we're all human beings and we all feel the same things going through life. And one of the things was with Reagan, I don't think as an actor he ever got to that place that he aspired to be as an actor. And whether it was that, he was relegated to B movies by Jack Warner, and, John Wayne already had his spot, or whatever it was. And he was married to Jane Wyman I think at this time. And she was winning an Academy Award while his career was going down. And what do you feel like inside with that?
Yeah.
It's those little things that actually kind of shape us in a way. And, I think God's purpose for him was becoming president. And it was because really with kind of his career going downhill that he became vice president and then president of the Screen Actors Guild, which was really his entry into politics.
My goodness.
And fighting communism, back in the 50s and 60s, as in the guild there.
That's actually an amazing point that you bring up, that so often we fight the thing that we're trying to prop up, or that we're trying to do. What if he would have kept fighting and pushing and elbowing back into roles? You see, God was making a left-hand turn
Well,
for
that's
him. You
that's
know?
what we do. Is it? I get this impression that keeps coming back to me that you got to be careful what you ask God for, because He just might give it to you,
Yeah.
and He'll give it to you in a way that you didn't expect, and you go, wait a minute, that's not what I meant, that, and we're tested in that way, and it's about finding purpose in life. What is God's purpose for us, and that's I think He got led in a roundabout way to that, and acting helped out in the end because as president he was the greatest actor we ever had.
So how do you think the assassination attempt on his life changed him?
Very interesting. We just had one,
Yeah.
a couple, another one, first one since Reagan. In fact, I think he said that my life is no longer my own.
Yeah.
After surviving that,
Yeah.
it's going to be a very humbling
Yeah.
event to happen to you.
Life-changing.
Your mortality passes in front of your eyes, and we're mortal. God reminds.
What we're here for.
Yeah, and Reagan as well. He was waving, a bullet bounced off. It went in right here. They were going to go back to the White House because they thought he was okay, and blood came out of his mouth about halfway there, and they went to I think it was Walter Reed, and the bullet was about that far from his heart. So again, it was about a quarter of an inch from being gone.
My goodness. I had the opportunity to sit with Mikhail Gorbachev for 2 days and interview him for a different project. We've not used that footage. He's now passed away, and so it was a while back that we were able to do this. And he was a politician, and I asked him a simple question. Mr. Gorbachev, your mother was a very well-known believer in Christ. You were given your name, through the priest at the church, and all the different, the different things. Are you a believer in God? Are you a Christian? And he did this political answer, and he said, I
was baptized.
I was baptized, and I was this, and then when the church, when the Orthodox Church celebrated its 1,000th-year anniversary, I allowed them to, do this celebration. And you tell me, am I a Christian? You tell me, am I a Christian?
No, you
And that
tell
wasn't
me.
good. That wasn't good enough for. So I asked the same question about 7 times. Finally, I got him to answer, yes, to this. Did God use Ronald Reagan and you to make the world a safer place? And he said, duh. There's going to be a point in watching the film, and we saw an early version, and that had some missing pieces and this and that and the other thing, but basically you turn into Ronald Reagan at some point during this thing, and that's
The
always
end of it is so moving
and
to me.
the end is just absolutely
beautiful.
just you choke up, and that's almost to respond to what you said about that's almost when you decided to take the role, is when you went there and felt the humility of what Ronald Reagan was as a person. You take the role. Those scenes filmed there are kind of the emotional climax of the whole movie, and that works. Dennis,
Yeah.
seriously, that was very well done.
Ronald Reagan was authentic, and that's what came across, and that's people who didn't agree with him knew he was an authentic person.
Yeah.
And admired that. And I think there's a lesson in all of that for us. The movies is to entertain, for us to go into, the dark and watch a story that it inspires and entertains us. And that's the first thing.
The word authentic triggered something that I want to kind of remind everybody, that we literally sat with Gorbachev for 2 days in his office in Moscow. We put him on camera for several hours. with his interpreter at his side, longtime interpreter. His name is Pavel. Pavel was so good at interpreting that you could really have a conversation with Mikhail Gorbachev. It was amazing. And this authentic moment that you're talking about, Reykjavik, most historians look back at Reykjavik as a disaster, except Gorbachev didn't. He saw the authentic Ronald Reagan and said, we're finished.
Looking back, I think that's where the Cold War was actually won. It was Reagan, for the first time, America, president said no to the Soviets. It was instead of appeasement.
Yeah.
And that's where they had always gotten us with, with Carter and detente and that. And Reagan said no.
Yeah.
And I myself, who was a big fan of Reagan back then, I was mad at him.
Yeah.
I felt, he's acting like an old codger.
Yeah.
It finally came up, here it is. We had peace in our time. We were going to get rid of nuclear weapons altogether. Right at that conference. It was going to happen. And Reagan had walked out because the Soviets had always done that. They never lived up to their agreements. But he walked out, and they came back and built for real this time. It wasn't just a show.
The way I heard it in those 48 hours was that was the end of it, and they saw the authenticity inside of Reagan. When he said no, they knew he meant it, and Cold War was over there. So in '89, the wall started coming down. I was there in 1990.
I went over there myself during that.
I took a chisel and a hammer, and
a sledgehammer.
All your pieces
all the guard dogs, the German Shepherd guard dogs, were just like, they were trained to like attack everybody, but the guards were all laughing and having a great time, and it was what a feeling.
I have a piece of the Berlin Wall about this big in my office that I broke off and put a towel around it, carried it back to the United States. But I have a picture of my oldest son, who's now 34, in diapers, and I'm holding him in East.
He's got his little hands on the rebar.
On the east side of Berlin, of the wall. Fantastic. I'm holding him in my hand like this. He's hanging onto two pieces of rebar like this. And so the Berlin Wall was built the year I was born, and it was torn down the year my son was born in 1989. And so 61 and 89. And so Ronald Reagan has always been this bigger than life thing. And for
that was an impossible thing. I mean, before that, I'd done a movie in Germany about 4 years before that, and talked to people. I went to the Berlin Wall, went through Checkpoint Charlie, went over to the other side. No one ever believed the Germans that would ever come down, ever. And it what it did, it was like a flame was lit in the heart all of a sudden, with everybody.
Like hopeless.
It was incredible.
And then all of a sudden, this flicker of hope.
Right.
Oh, maybe that could happen,
Reagan
amazing.
Famously never kind of solved any of the intramural squabbles in his team, and if his cabinet was fighting, it's like, you guys work that out. I largely adopted that same thing. Everyone has to kind of work everything out themselves.
You're a delegator.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I love that, because he was after one thing, and he was after about tearing down communism in that Cold War, and he got it done. And it was just
the big idea, not only in our hearts, but for the people that were living under that system.
Right.
It just didn't work. It was breaking people's hearts.
What's your favorite scene out of the movie?
Gosh, I got a bunch of them. I really do. And I think the scene where Gorbachev and he have that first meeting in Vienna, face to face, it certainly pops up in my head.
Where did you shoot that, Dennis? Where was
we shot that in Oklahoma.
Yeah, at that big.
At the Masons.
And you shot here.
Masonic Temple. What?
You shot in here.
We shot here too. We shot a large part of the movie in Oklahoma at I think it's the largest Masonic temple in the world.
It's
in fact,
it's a
it's
big
huge
thing for the filming industry.
You can make
for
it
sure.
into anything. We even made it into Berlin. Out there for
Sure.
tear down this wall speech. That scene really comes out because it was their first meeting, and they went into that room and just had that face-to-face, one-on-one with each other. And it was kind of an impossible thing that happened. But Reagan had that way, he could break through to people.
We're in Southern California, and if I kind of look over my shoulder
amazing.
here, that is a full-size actual version of Air Force One. Did you shoot on board Air Force One?
Yes,
one?
We shot on board.
Right on the airplane here?
So,
Right up there.
so being
Added
on
that to
this
it.
plane made me feel really old.
It looked it
Oh, my
seems too
goodness.
small in
It
there.
really
and all
looks
the
like-
technology that's in there, it's like,
Well-
I remember that.
Yeah, I think it was after Reagan or after Bush, actually. While Bush, they were building the 747 for
Yeah.
Bush. And I think he barely got to use it for about 3 weeks before Clinton. This
So
is
there's a
classic.
big giant helicopter kind of down on the
Marine
next floor
one.
down there, and you filmed on that here at the Reagan Library.
Yeah, they were kind enough. We really got great support from the Reagan family, even, and the foundation and the library and the ranch, and there's so many people who really wanted to see his story told.
Did you ever come to a point playing Reagan where you felt really solid in
Not
representing him.
Not once.
really?
Not once.
Not once.
No, not once. No once.
When
I'm
did
just
you
doing
feel
the
most
best.
like
I
him?
would do the best that I could.
You said tear down that wall.
That's, I mean, there's, you just try to do the best
Yeah.
that you can do and do
You
everything
really
you could
did
do.
a great job.
That's what.
You really did.
I can't believe you said that, because literally you turn into the guy in the movie.
Oh, I think the minute you say, I've got this one,
Then the Lord allows something
that's
to get you over
it's
yourself.
like,
doesn't it?
okay, here it comes.
Huh.
It's good. You got to be always trying to learn something,
Yeah.
right to the very end and run to the tape with it, because you sit on your laurels and, you're not learning a thing.
I wanna remind everybody of something, that I have two boys. They're 34 and 30. So when you did the Rookie, that was one of the biggest movies of our movie-going experience back then. I don't
Yes,
remember
thank you for
exactly.
that.
I don't remember exactly.
If you had a
what year
boy,
that-
he was,
Yes.
yeah.
So my kids were playing
beautiful
for
movie.
the Dodgers in their Little League, and our Little League team actually played at Dodger Stadium, and they had some fields up behind it. Pete Rose's kid was on our team.
Oh, really?
So, yeah,
Wow.
crazy. But that was a big moment in our life. That movie was endearing to many, and
that very much reflected my life too. That movie, what it was about, because it wasn't about baseball; it was about second chances in life.
yeah.
And I think everybody can relate to that.
We don't need that.
But
Yeah.
Third chances is
is
better
and
even.
third and fourth and fifth and sixth. Yeah.
Okay, remember a moment in the filming where you felt inspiration to do the scene? Okay, you've admitted that you never felt like you kind of got it
Not
nailed,
once.
but there
No.
had to be little.
I knew
little,
when things were good,
good.
were going well,
Give me
and I
an
knew
example of
things,
one of those.
and then when it wasn't well, I was just like, hey, we got to stop and work on this and get this thing right, I'll take the scene that in the second election, the debate where Ronald Reagan, about his age, it says, I will not for political purposes take advantage of my opponent's youth and inexperience, and that was plain. And I wanted to get that just right, because Reagan was very studied when it came to that. He was really funny. He always opened up with a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this spoke volumes.
Yeah.
He could have fought that age thing and earned back about it, but he did it with a joke.
Yeah.
that even had Mondale
Laughing.
Yeah.
You know, it was kind of the genius of Reagan at disarming everybody about his age. And they had already had a first debate where that's where the age came into question, because he had a bad debate in a sense, because it was all about facts and figures and stuff. And that's not the way that Reagan operated. But he told that, youth and inexperience. And there was a laugh, and Reagan picked up his glass of water
Did a little
movie
acting there.
That was a Jack Benny.
Sure.
Because he did the weight
Yeah.
to extend that out there. And that's all he had to ever do.
Can you do
it.
that line for us a little bit like you did in the movie?
With that, but I'm not going to repeat it for you. You got to see the movie for that. Sorry.
What do you want us to experience? Okay, we go to the theater August 30th. By the way, I thought about the thought that we've heard a little bit lately about bad debate nights. We've heard that phrase a couple of times in the last couple, like maybe a million.
Yeah.
Bad night. And but what do you want us to experience
Listen,
coming out of the theater?
I think for people who were born before 1990, remember what this country could be.
Wow.
You know, when we're all together, when we're united, and also remember, even though we were like not divided sometimes, how well we all work together in a sense, and what this country was and what it still can be.
Yeah.
And those after 1990, you get a little education of what it could be.
Yeah.
Still.
A lot of the viewers older than us are saying amen, and the younger ones are going, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know, because they haven't seen politics done at a level where we can really embrace
you
somebody
can't blame
as
them. You know, back then we had liberal Republicans and conservative Democrats. And there really wasn't all that much difference between the two.
Yeah.
And that has become so polarized. And, you know, in a way, I think COVID has been kind of the beginning of a spiritual awakening again in this country.
Beautiful.
You know, it's usually spiritual awakenings, usually they're a struggle.
Yeah.
And that's what we've done, and we've done it together. And we have to learn how to get back to that.
That little flicker of hope again.
Yeah, we're all Americans.
Right.
Yeah, it felt like we had a touch of it at 9/11, that all of a sudden we were Americans again. It feels like COVID kind of brought the world together. The largest streaming event in YouTube's history was Andrea Bocelli walking out in front of the Duomo in Milan singing Amazing Grace. He walked out and sang that song, and you know, it felt like we could attain to something bigger. And it feels like Reagan represented that last era of that time.
Right. Well, every generation has their own test of that too, don't they? And I think COVID was a way for one thing, everybody's life stopped.
Yeah.
And realized how
Crazy.
fragile, all this jobs and this and that are. And it brought us back into homes, doing a routine that we hadn't maybe done in 20 years. The kids are home, families are together, and it really brought some introspection to people about looking into, their own spirit. And what do you fill that with? And, I think you have to talk to God at some point.
Yeah. Something we haven't talked about is Tim and Nancy. Their little love affair through all the years was so inspiring.
That's really central to this film.
Yeah.
In fact, in a way, you could say this is the love story, this film. Yes. There wouldn't have been a President Reagan without Nancy. And I'm not saying that she was the puppet master or anything like that. It was just the strength of their relationship. They had God in their relationship as well. And how behind him she was. And they found strength in each other. And he wrote her love letters every day, a little love note. Even would after in the hospital after the assassination attempt. And and Penelope Ann Miller, she plays Nancy, and I don't know, she channeled her. I don't know
Yeah.
how she was doing this, but it was like sometimes even annoyingly so, a little bit. I mean, it's so great.
Too good.
It was fantastic. I mean, I would look at her. I would have had been able to do Reagan without somebody really fantastic in that part. She was
She'd be
so
great.
good.
Let's circle back to the influence of your mama on you and this movie.
Yeah. Well, my mom was always has been. She was the rock in my life, you know. She was there. She was always there to remind me about a lot of things, and, you know, a lot of things I didn't want to hear as well. But,
What are moms for?
you know, she was just a really great lady who, you know, loved God and wanted us to have a relationship with Jesus in a very personal way. That personal way really kind of came to her really back in the 80s as well, you know, which I guess is late in life. But she was, you know, she was somebody with principles too. And I really miss her. I do know that.
She was happy when you finally signed on to this film.
Yeah, she was around for that. I wish she was here for when it comes out next month, but she'll be here in spirit.
For sure.
Your final thoughts concerning what you want our audience to know about this film and this experience and what they'll experience in the theater, whatever you want to.
Well,
Final thoughts, yours.
Oh, like I said, I want people to be entertained and inspired by this story, you know, because it's about a man, Ronald Reagan, but I think it's about us too, you know, as Americans and what we stand for and who we are, and you know, he wasn't a saint. You know, no one is. He was a human being, but there's something there to aspire to, I think.
I love your thought that it's almost like there's going to be a whole generation of people that are going to get to see what politics actually could be like because they've never actually seen it.
No, I haven't seen it in quite a while.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Have we?
It's in theaters this August 30th. And Dennis, thank you for making time for us.
Thank you so
here at
much
the
for having me.
Library. And to the TBN viewers, you're going to see him on Huckabee, and you're going to see him over on MSM with Dr. Phil. You're going to look. This is a big movie for our time right here. It is simply Reagan in theaters, August 30th.